Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood. You're watching The Political Vigilante. I'm here with my friend and former detective with the Phoenix Police Department, Eric Oldenberg, who was on the show several years ago. You were a child crimes investigator, and now you work with a company. Explain exactly what the work you're doing now, because it's still relatable to what you did as an investigator.
Yes, very. I have to say, you just used the term evangelical, and it's funny because my my title with this company is I'm a software evangelist. So software will be coming back, and we will be we will be building a platform, and I want you all to join me. I just use this as a ruse to get people to So I work for a very small company based out of Gothenburg, Sweden. And what we do is we produce or we develop software for investigators who are child crimes investigators who need to review large amounts of digital media. So our software exploitation is a big thing, and we're really starting to see a lot of the cyberbullying and the catfishing, where they get somebody to send a couple of they get underage children to send a couple of images, and then they use that as blackmail to send more and more and more and more and send money and things like that. So it's gotten out of control. But basically what our company does is we build this software platform so that when you identify an offense, we do a search warrant at your residence. We have to collect up every single piece of evidence that could potentially have a picture or video on it stored. So we'd have to get every laptop, cell phone, thumb drives, hard drives, old computers, all that stuff to review those images to make sure, to find the images that we want to charge the individual with, but more importantly, we want to locate any images and videos that no one has seen before, that aren't known by law enforcement, so that we can find and rescue those victims. So our software basically kind of does that. It assists in if you think about it, or if you know the statistics, year over year, there's been a more than 100% increase in the amount of cyber tips that are submitted to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So there's been this ridiculous curve of images and videos being produced and made available on the internet, but there's not the personnel increase in law enforcement, as I'm sure you're aware, to help combat that crime. So that's what we do, is we just try to make computer crimes investigators, basically internet facilitated crimes against children. We try to make their job easier, because I want you to think for a second about imagine having to watch this material. And one of the biggest problems with the material is the public isn't really aware of exactly what it is. A lot of people, because Graham, who wants to live in a society where we believe there's adults out there that will hurt children for their own sexual gratification? We don't want to believe that. So as a society, we kind of, relegate it to, it's that innocent bathtub photo, or it's the barely legal. Are they 18? Are they 17? The girl in the pigtails and the schoolgirl. That is not it. It is the investigators doing this job. So we aim to reduce the amount of exposure of the material, because we want investigators that are passionate about doing this work. We want them to stick around and continue to stay in the field, because what happens is we get overexposure. Within a couple of years, people are like, no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And they take these expert skills they have and they go work for some private company that has nothing to do with child exploitation, which is fine for them. But then we lose somebody. We basically lose one of our best players, right? They get traded to some other team, and now they're not in the fight against child exploitation. So that's basically what our software does.
And so the software basically, it limits the exposure. So you don't have to look at these. When you arrest somebody, they've got these videos or whatever, photos on like 5 or 6 devices. The investigator doesn't have to look at all of the devices. The software does that, right?
Right, exactly. So if you have the same picture on your phone, a laptop, a tablet, an external hard drive, and a thumb drive, our software will recognize all those pictures match, and it'll stack them into one image, so that an investigator only has to see one version of that file, and then they can do whatever they need to do, rather than seeing it
Sure.
as they get to this device and they get to the next device, the next device, and so on. It concatenates all that and deduplicates that material. Yep.
Okay, so this is what I really want. I wanted to give people just a baseline of what you do and the software and how it relates to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, because you've said on this show, and you and I have had conversations about this, that most, they make the videos. So the problem that I'm having, and I want to get your professional opinion on this. So Ghislaine Maxwell, gets sentenced to 20 years. R. Kelly gets sentenced to 30 years. And all of this information. Now, you just gave an example of, we saw 3 years ago, 2019, in July of 2019, when Epstein got arrested, we saw the FBI wheel out literally hand trucks with stacks of all of this evidence showing. And I'm sure part of your job as an investigator was, oh, who's this other person in the video? Who's this other male, this adult? Let's get who's this guy, because we have evidence of him committing a crime. Let's see if we can figure out who this guy is. So the FBI seizes all this information from Epstein's penthouse, from his mansion, his island in the Virgin Islands. I believe even they got stuff from his compound in New Mexico. No mention of people with huge ties. I mean, during the trial, so many weird things happened during this trial. And again, you're an investigator. You've been involved I'm sure you had to testify. You've seen the court system deal with this. And so many weird things happened. First of all, they threw out a bunch of evidence that was not permissible. They said only 4 victims could testify. In the Larry Nassar case, there was something like 100 some victims that testified. Only 4 people were allowed to testify. During the trial in December of last year, they released 118 pages of FAA flight logs. In that, it showed that Trump had actually been on 4 more flights. Prior to that, we only knew of 1 flight. So there was now 5 total. I find it peculiar that these media outlets like MSNBC and CNN that just hate Trump would love to fry him on something like this, didn't talk about that at all. Because if you talk about that, well, then we got to talk about the 26 flight logs showing Bill Clinton. He claims it was only 4. We have to talk about the 2 flight logs Hillary Clinton was on. We have to talk about all these powerful people. And also, she just got moved to a country club prison in Florida. And there's no photos there's no mugshot. Now, I understand it was a federal trial. You cannot have cameras in a courtroom in a federal trial. I totally understand that. Whitey Bulger had a federal trial. His mugshot is literally on the DOJ's website right now. You can check. The MS-13 gang, federal trial, no cameras in the courtroom. All 13 of their mugshots are on the DOJ's website. No mugshots of her. No, you would think there'd be paparazzi following her, getting moved in this van to Florida, or however, there'd be something, some long shot of her in an orange jumpsuit, getting in a van or something. So how do you, as an investigator, knowing the patterns, I'm sure you were trained in profiling, you know what the profile of a pedophile, of a child crimes perpetrator looks like. There's a lot of similarities, right? Like, check all the hard drives, so they seized all this stuff from her. I don't want to get into too much conspiracy because that's not the world you operate in, but they've seized evidence. There's all this hard evidence that I would imagine would be enough for you as an investigator to charge some other people with, flight logs, stuff like that. How are we not hearing any? I mean, the obvious answer, obviously, these are the most richest people in the world, so they have the money to cover this up. But just as an investigator, how the hell do you look at this? I mean, how do you explain this as someone who did this for a living, prosecuting these people?
I think what you're saying, all these questions you have are very, very valid questions, because one of the I actually just attended a conference last week. The largest child crimes conference in the world was in Dallas, Texas last week. And I got the pleasure of hanging out with some folks down in Southern Australia who are victim ID specialists. So what they do, and Australia is leading the charge in crimes against children investigation. It's absolutely wonderful. But the guys I was hanging out, investigator found this out immediately. The goal is now to identify the children in these pictures. So that is step number one. It's called victim identification. We want to identify A, who has been hurt, who has been harmed, and then B, we need to figure out who his friends are, and who they're talking to, and who they're talking to, so that we can now focus our attention on them. So to have one person out of this whole mess just be the only one that there's a name, there's no any investigation into who else is involved, that's a huge question, Graham, because frustration would be the word for me. If that was my investigation, I would be climbing the walls. Why are we not talking about the other people? And because think about it this way, we talk about Jeffrey Epstein's island, right? For some people that went there, some it was a whole bunch of flights and they went back and forth. But for some people, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And when you have a once in a lifetime opportunity in vacation, you're going to the place you've always wanted to go your entire life. What are you going to do when you're there? You're going to take pictures. You're going to take video. You're going to memorialize exactly. You want to remember that trip. And then you want to show your friends the pictures, and so the pedophiles want to show their friends in their community, and so they're.
So just to be real clear here, as an investigator, that's the thing. Pedophiles like sharing these photos and videos with other pedophiles, right?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Kind of a bit of perspective about the Maxwell sentence. I live in the state of Arizona, and in the state of Arizona, we have very strict laws against exploiting children. And I just testified in a trial 2 weeks ago on a person that I found trading images across the internet with other people. And it was just this one guy, and all the material he was trading, he didn't create. He just found it on the internet and just shared it with other people. He went to trial, and our law, because he was found guilty, I just found out he was found guilty yesterday. He is going to spend 100 years in prison. He will die per image, per visual depiction. So when he rolls the dice and doesn't take the plea and gets sentenced, the minimum the judge can sentence this guy to is 100 years in prison. So contrast this one person who we don't know whether or not he's ever touched a child. In my opinion, given the right set of circumstances and impunity, anybody who is sexually attracted to children will offend. That's just a fact. If you are into, like Graham, you surf a lot. If you're into surfing, and I go to your computer and I see all these pictures of surf boards, right, and places to go surfing, and and you're chatting with your buddies about it, and you're visiting websites about new surfboards, would it surprise anybody in the slightest to open up the door in your house and see a surfboard, maybe a couple surfboards in there? No.
Three.
Yeah, three, exactly. And that correlates. So, but we don't know if this guy ever offended on any child, and he will die in prison in the state of Arizona because of this. And then you contrast that to somebody who, if there was any victim ID officers that have anything to do with this case, they are livid right now, because the first thing you do is try to figure out who else is involved, because these guys, they're not acting alone. This isn't and clearly in this investigation, they're not acting alone. So for me, it is the ultimate form of frustration. And then you see the R. Kelly sentence and you're like, I mean, I get it, this guy, but this is one guy. I mean, Epstein and Maxwell were a wrecking ball of exploitation, of abuse. They absolutely were.
For decades.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Like this is the thing that is so, like, I said, I guess according to the Maxwell trial, she acted alone and trafficked these kids to an empty field. Like nobody else was involved. Like, I mean, you got to be kidding me, man.
It's lunacy. Absolutely.
So
and it makes the people who want to trust in the government and trust in, you know, that it's going to be, everything's going to be done the right way and everyone's going to be treated equally. Things like this really, really, really make you question. I mean, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, this is a great one to start with. Like, this is
Yeah.
a great first one. Let's enter conspiracy theory world. Let's check this one out, because this one's pretty damn, I don't know, it's pretty upfront.
It's literally like right in plain sight. Now, just to play devil's advocate here, because someone could say, well, hers was a federal trial, so the federal laws are different than Arizona's laws. What would you?
But again, there's one person. We're only
right.
How is there one person in a sex ring? Two people. Oh, one's dead, so we just have this one left. Where are the other suspects? Where are the other victims? They're somewhere. I guarantee you that they have built, somebody in some location has built the old diagram that says this connects to this, connects to that, flight logs, whatever, her whatever, the black books. Come on. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Where would you, if you were the lead investigator on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, where would you be? What would you be doing? Like, what would you, knowing the information you have in front of you, which is, let's just say it's the information we all have, the flight logs, the evidence seized from Epstein's compound, the 4 eyewitnesses who said that's the other thing that drove me nuts about her case. Eyewitnesses said she participated, but she was never charged ever with that. It was only with trafficking. And the media would never call her a pedophile. Like, I don't know if it's just
in discussions about female pedophiles. So if I was the lead investigator in that, I would basically, it's all about connecting. Who does she talk to? Well, first of all, let's identify as many victims as we possibly can. Talk to any child, anybody who's an adult now that was on the island when they were underage, find out who they are and identify them, and then interview them and find out what happened, and then start building kind of a, okay, so, you know, let's say we identify victim number 22. Victim number 22, who, you know, can you identify the people that you had sex with that, you know, and then I would start going and interviewing people, interrogating people as to far as, okay, we've got a witness who says you did this, tell us otherwise, or tell us what happened, and just go and start building this pool of victims and suspects. I mean, because you have to, 4 that number makes me sick. Like, that's ridiculous. And part of it was probably, well, we don't want to prejudice the jury. We don't want the jury to, you know, if you parade in 100 people, and that probably, I don't know, but that probably was stemmed from from that doctor's trial where they just brought in victim after victim after victim. And eventually the defense was like, all right, like, that's enough. This is making us look like crap. And unfortunately in court, they do things like that a lot, where they don't want to prejudice the jury, because remember, this is just Maxwell we're talking about. We're talking about what she did. And the courts are really good about basically putting blinders up to the jury about anything outside of exactly what we were talking about. Okay, did she track it or traffic this person on this date? Okay, that's all we can talk about. We can't talk about whatever, but all that's decided before the trial starts, like what they can and what they can't talk about during trial. So in my opinion, something for some reason, and I don't know what it is, I think you're closer to the truth than what we're hearing in the media. Someone decided we're just going to focus on this. You hear the headlines about these powerful names that are on there, and they're not releasing it, and they're not doing anything because of so many. And it goes across the whole political spectrum. It's not just there's these dirty Republicans or these dirty Democrats. It's the whole power structure. And nobody, I mean, the whole thing with Prince Edward, like
Prince Andrew,
excuse me, like what? We've got pictures, and it's.
Yeah. Again, let me ask you this: as an investigator, you're investigating this case. You're the lead. Let's say you're the lead investigator when Epstein got arrested, and you see this evidence about Prince Andrew. Wouldn't you be subpoenaing this guy for at least an interrogation?
Yes, find out get all their travel records, where they were and here's the thing. It's so easy with powerful, rich people to find out where they were, what they've been doing. It's not like there's some guy on the street that's paying cash to live in a motel somewhere. There is a trail. There's a financial trail. Every one of these very rich people leave a financial trail behind them wherever they go, and they're easier to find and track down than anybody else. And even if you find them and they I'm not going to testify. I'm going to remain silent. You're starting to build this case of all these people. It's like, how can you be a one-person conspiracy or a two-person conspiracy with Epstein? How is that a thing? That is a question that I hope someday. I'm praying for the day I open up Twitter and they're like, the list has been released. Somebody leaked it now, in my opinion. This is nothing. If this happened as a part of my investigative process, we'd still be investigating it. There'd be so many leads and so many. It's like that happens so. Graham, the trial I just testified in was a case I did in 2016, and it was one guy with 4 devices.
6 years for that trial. And her case was like, she was arrested 2 years later. She's in trial. Her case was like wrapped up in 6 months.
Exactly. And then they don't have to address it again. So I'm with you, brother. I am with you as far as something is fishy, to say the least. Yeah, there are, but what saddens me the most about it, the thing that really saddens me, and it should really sadden the public, is yes, let's identify these powerful people, but let's find the victims, and let's get the victims the treatment they need. And if they're doing it on the island and they're all focused, you think these people are just pedophiles when they show up at the island? Right. No, of course not. That's not just, now I'm attracted to kids. Now I want to have sex with a 15-year-old. No, you always want to. So there's so much more. And the tentacles reach so far that this would be a 10-year investigation, just trying to track down everybody. But let's not forget the victims the children that were forced to do things. And you can say, there's a lot of people that are like, well, they can make up their own decisions, and they went to the island and they were lured by but they're kids. Look at how dumb you were and how dumb I was when I was 18, 17, 16 years old.
The human brain is not fully developed until it's almost 25 years old. So it's like
they don't have the ability to consent. Honestly, the children can't consent. So there's a whole slew of victims out there that we don't know about that are living silently, knowing that this all happened. Imagine them. Imagine being one of those people that was trafficked. Nothing.
Yeah. And then there's nobody else it's hard to just go, there's this massive cover. This is a massive cover. I don't know what else to say. I don't like being a conspiracy guy, but the wealth of evidence we've seen, not to mention what you just said about the one guy with 4 devices gets 100 years.
Yep.
And your first thing as a child crimes investigator, the way you're trained is to look for the whole look for everybody else. I'll never forget the conversation you and I had in 2011. I had a show in Phoenix, and you were still on the force, and the Sandusky thing had just broken. It had just broken open. And I was like, and you said, oh, Graham, it'll probably come out that he was getting kids for alumni. And I was like, oh, wow. And you're like that, because that's just, as an investigator, what you're trained. There's a bigger thing here, because they have to, keep this, because it's a horrific crime. They have to keep this hidden, and they have to find their little secret clubs and the dark web and whatever else. And you brought that up to me, and I was like, oh, wow. And when that happened, and then cut to 8 years later, I start really paying attention to the Epstein case. And one of the things that came out, and again, I want to ask you more about this seminar you were just at about the female pedophiles, but I want to draw this connection here. And again, I want to hear your opinion on this as a child crimes investigator. So you told me that in 2011. I was like, wow. An interview that Whitney Webb did with Maria Farmer. Maria Farmer is one of Epstein's victims. She was not allowed to testify. Her sister, who was also victimized by Epstein, was allowed to testify in the Maxwell case. One of the things she came forward, she was victimized in the 90s, and she came out in the 90s and spoke up and said, this happened to me. And she said, and she was Les Wexner, who created Victoria's Secret and as a modeling agency, which again, there's so many ties. Trump had a modeling agency. Jean-Luc Brunel, he just hung himself in prison in France. Yep. All these billionaires are just so distraught. They keep hanging themselves in prison when they get caught, I guess. And there's no mention of him, no. But he had so what Maria Farmer said when she came forward in the 90s, the FBI was worse to her, and these are her words, than how she was actually treated when she was being trafficked by Les Wexner. The head of the FBI was appointed by Bill Clinton. His name was Judge, well, now he's a Judge Free, F-R-E-E-H. Penn State University hired Free in 2011 to do an independent investigation of what happened in Penn State. And he showed that Joe Paterno and the administration knew about Sandusky. There's emails proving this. They did nothing about it for whatever it was, 12 some years, 13 years, something like that, because his first arrest was in 1998, I believe, Sandusky's first arrest. But this is something Maria Farmer said, is there always these, because she saw these global elites and saw their world, they're always trying to seal off the story so that it's not this, because they don't want, as you would have done, a 10-year investigation. So I don't want to get too conspiracy, but it's weird when a guy appointed by the Clintons have all these ties to Epstein. Epstein and Maxwell were invited to the Clintons' White House in the 90s. They were at Ghislaine Maxwell was at their daughter's wedding in 2011, which was 2 years after Maxwell settled out of court when Epstein got arrested the first time in 2009. Then this judge is brought in to do this private investigation to basically say Joe Paterno, who died, and these administrators and Sandusky, who's in prison, they were the bad guys. Case closed. Like, there's just too, I mean, I'm an amateur investigator, right? I'm not a professional like you are, but I'm drawing these connections, and I would be asking these questions. And so, I mean, how do we rectify that? This all of these sort of dots getting connected, and then nothing is done about it. I mean, what do we do as a society? Like the most powerful people in the world are sex trafficking pedophile billionaires, and they call the shots, and we just all have to live in this. No, I mean, I don't want to sound too crazy, but I don't know what else to do.
No, it's terrible. But one of the things you have to realize is that, you know, and I think you know this, but once you get to a certain point of wealth and all that stuff, everything becomes about money at that point. How, you know, and if we have something that's gonna destroy the revenue stream or whatever it is we have, we got to seal that off as quickly as possible and move on. Because the more it's in the news, the more victims that are talking, the more platforms that people have to discuss this, the more of a financial issue it could cause with these big people. So they want to keep it. And I mean, quite frankly, the tentacles are going to go beyond the rich and powerful people. Like, you know, they're sharing with other people, and the rich people have friends that aren't rich people that are, you know, just based on the fact that they have these connections for, you know, both wanting to have sex with children and things like that. But it's clearly, and well, you know what, let me say this. I will say that during my time as an investigator, certain cases, the higher ups, the chiefs of police, all that stuff would be interested in, because it's a high profile case. And then the high profile case, instead of Eric getting to investigate it the way he wants to investigate it, now you're being directed how to investigate it. So that happens much more than you think. So any high profile case you see on TV, if you think some regular special agent on the FBI or some regular detective on some police department is allowed to investigate the way they want to, this would be a international mess right now, because once the powerful people get a hold of it, then they direct how you do your investigation, which a lot of people don't realize that. And sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's good because you don't want, detectives to do something that's going to, inadvertently make the police department look bad, or there's a sensitive something that has to do. But now ratchet that up to the ruling class in our country, and they're definitely directing how the investigation goes 100%. So it's exactly like you said. They're trying to seal off. Okay, we got Epstein. All right, he's gone. We got Maxwell. Boom, we got her put away. End of story. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But the problem is you're leaving. Let's not anybody forget about all the victims. And there's victims out there that are walking around every single day, having all that happen to them silently because of the shame that they feel. And imagine that. So here's kind of a side example. My son, my stepson, was shot and killed 12 years ago at a party in Chandler, Arizona. And because of the circumstances, he was treated more like a suspect than he was a victim. Well, the person who shot and killed my son is walking the earth today. He killed 2 people that night and was not charged with a thing. And he had some high, powerful attorney and all that stuff. So my wife and I have to live with that, knowing that the person who ended our son's life is walking around and just free as can be. Now, imagine that is somebody who was sexually molested, knowing that the person that did that to them is so powerful that they are beyond reproach. Like that has to be one of the most frustrating and sad things that a victim has to endure. They endured enough. Mm-hmm. I don't want to focus so much on who was arrested, who wasn't arrested, because unfortunately that shit happens. That's just, they've closed it off. But I hope to God, behind the scenes, every single child that was on that island that was raped or brutalized by an adult has been identified, located, and has been getting the treatment that they need so desperately for that trauma that they incurred. So, and that's not to say that I don't want the people to be arrested. I mean, one of the best things in the world is putting a pedophile in jail. You get to put someone away who hurts kids. So, but it's really easy. And law enforcement, a lot of times, all the way up to the top, they lose focus on who they're doing the job for. We're doing the work for the victims. We're not. And I have to remind new investigators all the time, you don't work for the police department. You work for these children that are being raped and brutalized in some circumstance that haven't even been found yet. Yeah. We need to get these children. So, but if you locate the perpetrators, you can get the children by finding the perpetrators. But I have to agree with you, Graham. It's something isn't right. It's clear. It's like, I don't know what a good analogy would be, but it's like if an entire football team went and committed some horrible crime, they raped a bunch of sorority girls or whatever, and they only arrested the quarterback, and that was it.
Right.
Like nobody else got. What about the tight end and the defense? What about those guys?
And the coaching staff and the owners of the team.
It was the quarterback. He was the one running it. I mean, how can you have a conspiracy when you don't have any? Who you're conspiring with?
I know there's a conspiracy of 1 or 2 people.
Yeah. What? That doesn't even make sense.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood. You're watching The Political Vigilante. I'm here with former child crimes investigator with the Phoenix Police Department, Eric Oldenberg, who is now working with a company that deals with software identifying child exploitation. And we've just been talking about the Maxwell case, but I wanted to specifically ask you about this since you brought up that you were just at a convention or I forget what it's called, but like discussing female pedophiles, because I think that's the thing that I don't think society, there's a documentary that came out on Netflix last year and I forget the name of it, but it's about these 2 twin brothers. and one twin hit his head when he was like 18 in a motorcycle accident, woke up in the hospital, remembered absolutely nothing. All he saw was this guy looked exactly like him. And the twin brother, and this is a spoiler alert for this, but the twin brother then tells him we had this fantastic childhood when they did not. And the mom was one of the abusers. And one of the things the guy said in the interview is he said, we want to think that pedophiles are the creepy guy in the van driving by, you know, the grade school, which sure, that guy exists, but you just shook your head because you know from your job that they're you know, members of society, they're well liked. And like in this documentary, the mom, everybody loved her, and she was like, you know, and when I had repressed memories come forward 5 years ago, I felt like something had happened to me, and I just assumed it was a man. I just assumed, because that's what society kind of tells us. Oh, it must have been this, and I was raised Catholic. Maybe it was a priest, which that's not outside the realm of possibility.
Right.
And I found, and it came. My memory came that it was a woman, and she was friends with my mom, and so and that has opened up a whole doorway for me. And there's this organization 1 in 6, which is for male survivors. That's the number that's what's reported. 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused by the time they're 18, and 45% of their abusers are female. And that was like, wow. And I've been in support groups, and I've heard a lot of people's stories, and it is way more women than I ever thought were possible. Not to discount the male. To me, a pedophile is a pedophile. I don't like any of them, but I wanted to hear from a professional standpoint in terms of the identification and the profiling of the perpetrators. What I'm sure there's a difference, because like men are typically visually more stimulated. So men are probably using more of the videos anyway, but I wanted to hear your professional opinion and was there any that you heard at this convention, and what new information is out there that maybe we as a society weren't aware of before?
Yeah. So let me start by telling you a story about one of the female pedophiles that I arrested as a part of my investigation. And it was one of the most surreal things ever, because basically someone was trading a child exploitation on the internet. And real quick, I want to just, for all and porn is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's been accepted mainstream. We don't want to think for a second any of this is accepted mainstream. But back to the story.
Pornography also is like, it's consenting adults typically, and this
exactly. I say, and it drives me crazy. But anyway, back to the story. So I arrested. So this person, we just identify an internet protocol address on the in Phoenix. We do all the background. Get there. There's an adult male, an adult female, and the adult female's 20-year-old son. We go to the apartment. There's computer parts everywhere. The 20-year-old son is one of these guys that is white as a ghost. His hair is down past his, won't make eye contact with anybody. He just looks like this total loser. So we're like, that's the guy. That's our guy. We definitely got this kid. He just wants to, whatever. So we bring him in, we interview him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And we're like, this is weird. So we're like, okay, it's not him. It's the adult male who's the boyfriend of the woman. And it's not his son. It's just her son. So we bring him in and we interview. We're like, it's got to be this guy then. It's got to be this guy. And we interviewed and interrogated this man for an hour and 15 minutes before he finally said it was Teresa. And because we're like, this guy's hiding something. He's hiding something. He's hiding something. He's hiding something. He's like, it was Teresa. And we were blown away. Like and she's an average looking, she's not like some creepy, she's just like an average looking woman, and like anybody you'd see. And so we bring her in and we're like, what the, I mean, what the fuck? Like, how? And what she told us was that when she was young, her father left them when she was about 8 or 9 years old. And so she didn't know him very well. And as she got older and interacted with him more, and she became sexually, or a sexual person, she was sexually attracted to her father. So she realized she was physically attracted to her father. So her story was she would download these video files and she would pretend exactly like what holy, and she had a whole slew of these videos, and then she tried to show them to her boyfriend to you know, hey, you know, watch this, because she wanted him to like have the fantasy that she was, it was absolutely 100% insane. But that's just one example. But yes, there is and back to your other point too about the creepy guy in the van and stranger danger. That's when they didn't know what they were doing. Nowadays, it's your family. Most of the time, it's a non-custodial adult that you live with. So a woman has a child, the man marries or, you know, starts to date the woman so he can get at the children. So that's typically what it is. But I will tell you, there are no socioeconomic borders to pedophilia. I've arrested people that quite literally are homeless, and I've arrested people that have a helipad on the property that we're conducting the search warrant in. Like a surgeon. We arrested a surgeon that had a beautiful wife. He lived in a mansion. There were Lamborghinis in the driveway. There was a helipad, and this guy flushed it all away so he could look at pictures of children. But getting back to the female part of it, it is, I mean, there's clearly something psychologically broken with a woman who is going to do something like that, right? Because their instinct, their intuition is to protect and to nurture a child. And something is completely miswired where they don't do that. But what they're doing is in their mind, they're telling them it's out of love. It's like kind of like what Michael Jackson did, in my opinion, is he didn't believe he was a pedophile. I love these children. Right. I love them. And what do you do with people you love? You make love with them. Like, so the motherly instinct, they kind of use that as a means, and they also use it as justification, if that even makes sense. But it's just so twisted because it starts with the bathing of the kids, and then we start playing games, and it's not too dissimilar from the way that the adult males do it as well. But it's just, I think it's, here's the thing. You grow up pretty quickly to learn that, you know, don't trust guys until they kind of, you know, guys are, you know, they'll do what guys do, but women, no, we are genetically wired to believe they're going to take care of us. They're going to trust us. They're going to nurture us, which makes it so much more egregious when they violate that. Like that's going to cause some serious, and I'm sure you're dealing with some serious mental repercussions of what happened, because it's such a violation of what you expect in this world, what you expect from an adult female. Like,
yeah. And I've heard a lot of stories of, you know, the older sister, the babysitter. I mean, I've heard a lot of people share stories where the babysitter is like, man, the female babysitter come like abusing the 7-year-old, 8-year-old boy. I've heard that story, and girl. You know, I know women that have been abused by women. And so, and I've heard, again, female family members and all kinds of stuff like that.
That's typically where it starts, is within the home. Like,
right.
You hear all that, you know, there's a ton of money, and it kind of frustrates me, all this money and all these organizations fighting human trafficking. And I'm not discounting that human trafficking occurs. 100% it occurs. But the bigger problem is the children who aren't being trafficked. They're just at home. Right. And friends are coming in, adults are coming in, they're getting access to these children, and it's not really trafficking. They're just being abused straight up by people that they know and they trust. What an absolute, I mean, that has got to make you not want to trust people at all when you get violated by someone who by default you're supposed to trust.
Right. So the other thing too, like, how much of it, in terms of like not suspecting women, is it cultural in the sense of this story? the 30-year-old guy has sex with the 15-year-old girl. He's a monster. He's a pedophile. The 30-year-old woman has sex with the 15-year-old boy. And hey, high five, bro, you're in the club.
Right.
Like that. And I can remember being like 17, 18, 19 years old. Again, I was just like, oh man, I wish I would have, some hot 30-year-old would have, you know, and I know I have now friends who had that, guy friends, and they're like, oh, it messed me up, because again, you still have an adult exploiting a child, and a 15-year-old boy, his hormones are going through the roof. He would do anything for sex. I mean, give me a break. Like you could, a 30-year-old woman could come in and make this guy do anything. Yeah. And so there's that cultural thing of like, you know, oh, hey man, high five, brother, you're in the club now. So it's almost like we're and then you're excusing a female a predator. I mean,
no. And then, and the media makes it worse because the woman is always typically very attractive. It's like an attractive woman. And you're like, shit, if I was 15, right. No, but you're 100% correct. The problem is that, like you said, your brain hasn't developed enough. And let's not forget the number one tool that is used when you are going to abuse a child, and that is manipulation. That is 100% manipulation. And it's especially easy when you're an authority figure, and a teacher is you grow up, everybody loves teachers because they're because they have nurtured us. Mm-hmm. They have taken care of us ever since this kid was in kindergarten. He had a teacher that looked out for his best interests. And then he's 15 years old, and hey, I'm horny. It feels like this feels great, but that's not in their best interest. They are now doing something for their own purposes, and they are using that child. And then you feel, because they're not in love, they're not going to marry these. There's nothing like that. It's 100% manipulation of power to get what you want sexually, with complete disregard for the health and the mental well-being of the child that you're abusing. I mean, it's insidious is what it is.
Was there any new information that you found at this seminar that you were just at? You said there was a whole track about female pedophiles. Was there any new information or data that they've come across, or you came across?
No, it's just, it's one of these things that it's so infrequent. Like, you don't, I mean, I would say there's, it's 99%, in my opinion, I don't have the stats, but it's 99% male, if not even higher than that. So it's almost like when you find one, you don't believe, like we didn't believe it. I didn't believe this. There's no way. You didn't even consider that it was the woman. So part of the things that they're saying nowadays is consider the woman, consider, don't just discount it, because this is, and I think a greater problem is the proliferation of, and the easy accessibility of pornography on the internet, like Pornhub and things like that. And one of the number one searches is stepdad or stepdaughter and daddy, and all these inappropriate like relationships that are adult, but they're highly inappropriate, but hey, there's videos of it. And then people get this in this, in this mindset of this is what I want to do. But the bottom line is don't discount females, because, okay, when you become 14 years old, whatever, and you start getting sexual feelings, you don't choose, it's not a personal choice. I want to be attracted to women. I want to be attracted to men. I want to be attracted to both. You feel what you feel for whatever reason. And women, just as much, not just as much, but they're just as susceptible, I would say, as men, of having something in their brain that says, I'm attracted to that 8-year-old child or whatever. They're at a pool one day and they look around and they're like, wait a second, this is making me feel a certain way. And then the problem is, then the abusers become, the people who are abused, they become abused. And that's what one of the things Teresa told me is that she wasn't sure, she didn't remember, but she thinks she was abused by him when she was little. But abusers oftentimes, then they don't know where to put all that. So imagine you're a young woman and you get, you're the victim of a pedophile, maybe long-term, whatever. And now you have a child and you have all this, and now you're growing up and you're feeling, and you don't know where to put any of this stuff because there's no, who do you talk to? Like, who do you go to? There's no, clinicians. And if you find one, hey, this is what happened to me, they're going to be like, that's not my specialty, because there's just not enough. There's not enough information. But the bottom line is don't discount the fact that it could be a female. Period.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, all too well. And they can slip under the radar better because we're all looking for the guys.
Sure.
Like Teresa could have kept her mouth shut, and if her boyfriend didn't say anything, we would have been like, all right, let's take all this back to the thing and figure this out. And maybe nobody would have been arrested, because it's like you don't even see them. They're not even part of the landscape, but they are, which makes it more insidious than anything.
Well, yeah, getting back to the Maxwell case and Epstein, it wasn't just Maxwell. It was several other women were his like recruiters. I mean, that's the thing that was insidious too, is with regard to trafficking. A young, attractive woman is sitting alone, having coffee. If a guy goes up and goes, hey, what's your number? She's gonna be like, uh-huh. But another woman comes up and goes, oh my God, I love your dress. And she feels safe. Like you say, oh, it's a woman. So she's not, I can trust her.
Yep.
And then, hey, you should go to this party at my boyfriend's house. And then she's trafficked, like snatched up, or you should be a model. That's why the modeling industry is so insidious that's what the Epstein case uncovered, was all these like finding these 14, 15-year-old, beautiful girls going, we'll help you with your modeling career. I mean, Epstein was quoted by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of his victims, laughing after he got off the phone because he paid this family in France like 30 grand to send their daughters to him. And he's like, boy, everyone's got a price. Like, and it's just it's so insidious how it's done. But yeah, it's like you say, it's not just the men. There's women involved.
And girls, same thing. What happens is you spelled that out perfectly. Maxwell approaches somebody, hey, this is cool, let's do this, let's start hanging out. And then, hey, let's go to this cool party or this private island, wherever the hell we're going to do. And this 16, 17-year-old girl that hates her parents, this super cool woman, is now they're part of this thing. They take them to this party, and now they feel the pressure. Hey, wait a second. This person paid all this money to bring me here. Mm-hmm. They did all this, they did all that, and I don't want to make them mad. So, kids think they don't, they don't think, but we've all been in situations where we feel pressured to do something and we don't want to do it, but we do it anyway for a social norm or for some reason. But yeah, that's the thing you got to add on top of that is that it's all manipulation. They know these, one of the first investigations I did, there was a guy putting ads in a little paper publication, looking for models. And he was specifically looking for underage kids. So people would call up and they're like, hey, I want to get into this, but I'm not sure. And he'd be like, I'm 7. Well, don't worry about that. We can get you an ID. We can fucking do this. We can do that. So the girl, like you said, the girls and the young boys, they're struggling with self-esteem. And here's someone saying, you're beautiful. You're so beautiful. I want to show you to the world. And which isn't really true. They just want to groom them, basically.
And another thing too, and we'll move on to another subject in a second. But one of the things you said to me when I was in 2011, when the Sandusky thing is because he had that like disadvantaged kids foundation that he used. And you said, Graham, you show me 100 kids that have been abused. 95 of them probably came from tough homes because those kids are easier, to manipulate. Because again, if there's two parents paying attention, it's going to be hard to get to because like you'd say, they find the disadvantaged kid, the kid from the poor home whose parents is a single parent home or whatever, and go, oh, we got a new bike. Like if your kid came home and said, hey, that my soccer coach gave me a new bicycle, you'd be like, what? And everything would stop. You'd be talking to this guy. But if there's no parents around, or the one parent's working 3 jobs or whatever, that's the other thing. Maxwell had a non-for-profit that's dealt with something like Clean the Oceans. and in it on their website, and she since took it down. When Epstein got busted, she took it down. But it said like, we're going to help disadvantaged youth, learn about, saving the oceans or whatever. And it's like, yep, because again, if somebody said, they want to pay you, 40 grand to fly your kid to some modeling school, you'd be like, I don't know this guy at all, but you're poor, you don't have money, and somebody offers you 30 grand, you're going to go, yep.
But also too, like if someone approaches you and your daughter and says, hey, I want her to be a model, you're going to be like, what the fuck? But hey, I want your daughter to be a part of this youth to help clean up the ocean. It's a way to get their foot in the door. It's an opener is what it is. And it almost makes me, I didn't know about the ocean thing, but if you think about it, it's almost like it's a fishing metaphor. Like they're fishing for children. Like it's absolutely horrible, because that's what pedophiles do, is they gravitate towards jobs where it's a target rich environment. You go fishing, you're not going to go fishing out in the woods where there's no water. You're going to go to where the lakes are and where the rivers are. And that's what they do. They surround themselves with positions where they have access to children and authority over children. And now they've got this guise of, we're going to help clean up the ocean and we're going to do all that. And sure, they're out there doing that. But when the day's over and they're all having drinks and relaxing, and that's when things are starting to get out of control. But no, that's exactly what happens, is they surround themselves with potential victims. And I hate to say it, it's criminally brilliant to have come up with, like Sandusky's thing, we get troubled youth and, all this other stuff. And again, troubled youth is perfect. Products of dysfunction. That's like, nobody's going to go after the kid whose both parents are at every soccer practice. Like that's not going to happen. The kids that the coach is leaving and the kid's still waiting for his mom to show up. Hey, Billy, you need a ride? Like it's opportunistic. For sure. And if it doesn't come naturally, they create their own opportunity. And that's what that whole cleaning the ocean was. Create an opportunity to locate and target.
And what parent would be like, oh, I want my kids involved in a save the ocean thing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Exactly. And what's so insidious about it is the sports coaches and the people that work with kids that are actually doing it for good, noble reasons, and are good instructors and good educators and good coaches and a legitimate like youth clean the oceans group or whatever. Like, those are legitimate. And now they all can be suspect, like
exactly. It makes people look, imagine being me, knowing, having arrested soccer coaches and music teachers and principals and like people of authority. Yeah. I can't look at anybody without being like, wait, why, what's going on? Why is that person still doing whatever? Like, yeah, no, it's insidious, but the part of the problem is that the public, not only is the public not aware, they don't want to people don't want to know about this. They don't want to hear about this. They don't. Our chief of police several years ago told us to stop putting out press releases when we arrested pedophiles, because she didn't want our citizens to believe that Arizona was the pedophile capital of the world, because we were arresting 2-3 a week. Oh, we don't want to let the world know. God forbid people know what's going on in their own backyards. But yeah, it's absolutely brutal.
I think it's one of those things when people, when confronted with the knowledge of it, their first reaction is just like, nope.
Yep.
They just
block it out. Yep.
Nope. They don't want to hear it because it's too difficult. It's too uncomfortable. I mean, they've done studies on specifically with incest of like, majority of people are more uncomfortable with the person saying I was abused by a family member than the actual abuse that happened. Like, why'd you bring this up? Like, why did you just let it go? Like it's, you saw that with the Catholic Church. They're just like, hey, the church does good work. Like, shh, leave it alone.
And then let's not re-traumatize the victims and bring it back up again and make them tell their stories in court and things like that. Anytime you can avoid re-victimizing the children, because I mean, imagine you having to go up in front of a room full of 12 strangers and explain exactly what happened to you when you were a young boy. It's that you re-traumatize yourself, and then you traumatize the people that have to hear the story. So it's like it's just this perfect storm of we don't want to address it. Like the amount of funding that has been cut from child crimes investigations federally, locally, it's just ridiculous.